Hamas didn't want the people to have a chance of building up a beautiful new country. They wanted them to be poor and refugees and victims that the world has to support them. So they destroyed the greenhouses and the waterworks and the beautiful homes and everything that the Israeli settlers had built up. Hamas burned and destroyed, that the Arabs shouldn't have it. They didn't want them to have a good life there. They wanted them to be in this culture of kill, fight. We're the victims. We hate the oppressors. We're the oppressed. They're the oppressors. The only choice we have is just to kill, to terrorize. Some of the stories, some of the vignettes really just express God's love. A man on October 7th, he was a soldier. He was sent down right away to fight in the south. And the settlement he was sent to fight in, they were incredibly outnumbered. And this soldier got hit very severely in the back, the main artery. And he knew he had a tourniquet in his left pocket, but the injury was on the left side, so he couldn't possibly reach it. And he just lay on the ground from the bullet. And he thought, like, I have to get somewhere away from the terrorists. They have to think I'm dead, and I have to get somewhere to maybe survive. And he saw there was, I don't know how far away from him, like some monument. He thought if I could get under that monument, then they won't notice me. So he very quietly rolled toward the monument, hoping, of course, that the terrorists think he's dead. He reached under the monument and he lost consciousness. As he lost consciousness, he felt himself enveloped in just love. He felt so much love. And he thought, I'm not so perfect. Why do I deserve this? Why am I getting all this love? Why am I so beloved? What have I done to be so beloved? He felt embraced and he knew he's dying. He understood that must be what's happening is he's dying and his soul is ascending and he's leaving that, that very shattered body down below, which sort of, he looked down at that body and it felt good to just be ascending. But he's like, wait, no, I have a family. I need to go back. I can't leave. They need me. And as he was feeling that very strongly, he regained consciousness. He was on the hard floor under the monument, bleeding to death, but he had a new strength. He managed to get to the tourniquet. He managed to stop the bleeding. And he just lay there in silence because he knew if he made any sound, the terrorists might hear him and they'd for sure finish him off. He just lay there very quietly, and gradually other soldiers joined him, meaning it wasn't only his good idea. Other wounded soldiers did the same thing, and they all were under this monument, very, very quiet, and praying that the Israeli army would get there before the terrorists got to them. They were there for 8 hours. And he said during those whole 8 hours, it was unbearable. It was unbelievable. He had such a humongous, significant wound. He was hit so devastating. He was in such a horrific condition, it's impossible to fathom he actually survived 8 hours like that. But he said he knew he was going to make it because he already, so to speak, should have been gone. He already had his near-death experience, his out-of-body experience. And he knew if he came back down, it means he was destined to live. And after 8 hours, a helicopter came. And again, the whole story, how he even got to the helicopter. And he and every soldier who was hiding with him under that monument, they all survived. And now, at this point, he's rethinking his life. Till now, he believed in God, but not enough to live differently. Like the Talmud speaks of the thief who, before he steals, he stops and he prays to God that he should be successful. And it's like, what's going on? If you believe in God, why are you stealing? If you don't believe in God, why are you praying? So the point is, we can have belief, but it could be in a very encompassing but remote, detached, not really relevant to our life fashion. And therefore, it doesn't really affect us. So we believe, of course we believe, but we don't act differently because of our. So that's what this soldier is saying. He always believed, but he didn't lead a particularly godly life because of that belief. But now he's going to. And of course, we don't want to have such traumatic situations, but we also want not just to believe, but to internalize our belief that we lead a different life because of our belief. Did anyone here ever had something that really triggered them in terms of internalizing their belief? Anyone had such an experience? Again, this was a very, very, very dramatic one, and some are more and some are less. And sometimes it's more subtle and it's just the progression of our lives. Anyone have anything that they can think of as like that really triggered at them to internalize their belief? Maybe not. It's not like everyone had to, because sometimes it's just something and something. Ruthie, were you going to say something?
Yes, well, in my case, it's a matter of I always question, why our Heavenly Father choose one single nation and not everyone. But today I feel very fortunate, that it doesn't matter who was chosen. That was his will, and it has to be many reasons why. But the what actually opened my eyes was what the promise to Abraham, that through him the whole nations will be blessed, and I'm one of them. So I do feel very not deserving all those blessings, and if God, one of the rabbis was saying that God didn't create us or didn't call us to die or to be desperate or to be unloved. Is we have a duty, to love everyone and to help each other. And so it just, I mean, and among the nations, we were told that we didn't deserve anything, that we were all dead, and what's the point of changing our lives? And we were so bad that God will never even look at us. When I came to your teachings, I mean, all the Jewish teachings, I learned otherwise, that He loves everyone. And we just have to attach ourselves to His rules, to His commandments. And that's all He expects from us. And we all are welcome. I remember
Absolutely.
calling the first synagogues I started coming. I called and I said, I love to learn about our Heavenly Father. And he said, we were told that you guys never you don't want to know about the Gentiles, that you don't want to help Gentiles. That, I mean, it was such a premonitions to make to keep us away from God. And then when I learned that you don't feel that way, that you do want people to come to know our Heavenly Father, and that we are all welcome. So they say to me, I was shocked when they said, yes, of course. This is the house of God and everyone is welcome. I was dead by when I heard that, because I everything I learned, and the religions that I went through, I went all of them. And in the Christendom, I went through all of them, looking for God, and I never found him. So when I hear this, I was like, how can I deserve this? I mean, how can God predict from Abraham that we were all gonna be able to come to him and know him, get close to him? That was shocking to me. Thank you for all.
Absolutely. I mean, saying from Abraham, when his name was changed to Avraham, it stands for Av Hamon Goyim Nisaticha. I've made you the father of many nations. So Abraham really, of course, he's the father of the Jewish people, but he also has a mandate for mankind. Abraham and Sarah were focused on connecting mankind to God. As it says, Abraham converted the men, Sarah converted the women. It doesn't mean converted to make them Jewish. The converted concept means converted them to become believers in God. So
Exactly.
definitely that's Abraham and that's Sarah. Absolutely. And hopefully that's all of us. So thank you for sharing that. So there's many miracles coming out like literally every day. Literally every day. And a number of them express the point that we create miracles and our service of God is the catalyst for our miracles. So I was going to share a few that really express that point. As Ruthie said, we all connect to God by serving him. And for all of us, the more we internalize this point that we create the miracles. And as we serve, that's the catalyst for the miracles. So there was a group of soldiers in Gaza in a house that had been cleaned out, all completely exhausted. They worked very hard there. And there were 9 beds. I don't know what type of house it was, what type of building it was. There were 9 beds. They were okay. So 9 of us will sleep and the rest will, I don't know, they went on the roof. Maybe there was something they could sort of relax on the roof a little. And then there would be a shift and 9 more would sleep until they were called to keep trekking, to keep moving, whatever their next assignment was. All right. Everyone was excited. At least they get a little sleep. So 9 of them, the first fortunate 9 were chosen. They were going to get the beds and everybody else goes on the roof. And then they're like, wait a minute. We didn't daven the evening prayer, the Ma'ariv, the evening prayer. Let's do that before we sleep. Not always when you're a soldier do you have time to pray, but here we can. So let's do that. Okay, they were excited, but wait, there were 9 of them. A quorum in Jewish law, quorum is 10 Jewish males of age 13 and up. And here they were 9. All right, well, there's a lot of other soldiers on the roof. Not a big deal. So as somebody was going to go up to the roof to get a soldier who would volunteer to come down and join them, one soldier was coming down anyway. So they said to him, oh, can you be the 10th man for our minyan, for our quorum, for our prayer group? And he said, no, I don't do that stuff. Please, wait, go on the roof. There's a lot of other guys. Well, you already came down and we're all so tired. We just want to pray. All right, fine. But actually, the reason I was coming down was to use the bathroom. So after I use the facilities, I'll come out and I'll pray with you. Okay, great. So he goes into the washroom and they're waiting for him. He doesn't come out. And they're waiting and they're like, this is quite long. This doesn't make sense. So let's, in Gaza, you don't relax. So they sort of snuck up to the washroom and they hear inside, not noise, but sounds of struggling. They understood that something was going on. So they broke in the door and they saw that there was a terrorist that had his hand on his mouth so he couldn't scream and was trying to pull him down. There was a tunnel literally in that bathroom. They somehow have missed it when they cleaned out the house. They missed this opening to a tunnel shaft, and this terrorist had come up from the tunnel shaft and was trying to pull him down into the tunnel shaft, and he's struggling and trying to hold on to items to prevent him, and it's craziness. So in the meanwhile, the other soldiers saved him. They threw grenades down the tunnel shaft. They killed the terrorist, and it was like, wow. He said, this hour of prayer saved me. If I hadn't agreed to pray with you, nobody would have noticed how long I'm in the washroom. And eventually the terrorist would have overpowered me, called his friends, and I would have been pulled down. And they were thinking wow, there's a tunnel shaft there. They would have come up and attacked all of us. But in the merit of this hour of prayer, he got saved and they got saved. Not the same story, but similarly about the power of prayer creating miracles. There was a yeshiva, a school where men are studying. It was on October 7th. And it was during the time of prayers. They prayed and the whole day went by and they were never attacked. They're like, wow, everyone was attacked in their city. So many things were attacked and somehow they were not attacked. The whole day they were not attacked. It was like this little haven, this yeshiva, this boys' school that was not attacked, though they were in a place that everywhere else in that city was attacked. And they couldn't figure it out. And they looked at the security cameras. And what they saw was that there were 2 terrorists that came to the building and stood outside and left. And then they realized what happened. Based on the timing and the duration of time, the terrorists had come when the boys and men, were in the middle of the silent part of the prayer. The most holy part of the prayer is called the Amidah, or the Shemona Esrei, and it's a silent prayer. Now, these terrorists are Arabs. They're used to prayers in a mosque, and prayers in a mosque are quite loud. So when they came, now they knew everything was planned out. They knew the times, they knew the men are praying, but they came and it was so perfectly silent, and they stood for a while, okay, maybe you just came at an odd moment. They stood for a while. Instead of going in to check it out, they just stood there. It's quiet. It's perfectly quiet, absolutely quiet for a long time. Okay, nobody's here, whatever, nobody's home, and they left. Now, what was going on? What was going on was the chazan, which means the person who is leading the service. He was a young man from France. His name was Benjamin. And this was the end of the Sukkot holiday. Before Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the whole cycle of holidays, he had gone to a big rabbi that he was a follower called the Rebbe of Chernobyl. And he asked him for blessing. And this rabbi told him, pray with more intention, pray with more focus, and you should spend twice as long as you normally spend on the Shemona Esrei, on the Amidah prayer service. So based on the security cameras, because he was he took this very literally. It's just a few weeks later. It's 3 weeks after Rosh Hashanah. He took this very literally, and he's leading the prayer, so everyone has to follow his lead. So he's taking double as long on this quiet part of the prayer, and that double as long time that it was absolutely quiet is what saved this entire yeshiva, this entire group of men from being attacked, because the terrorists stood quite a while and didn't hear a thing. So again, amazing how our reaching out to God, and here this person that was leading the prayers was very religiously, very devoutly, really focusing on the prayer, and that saved everyone. A third such story, this came from, actually I know the family. He said his brother-in-law, Melchiel Bon Yosef, is a soldier. He's in the reserves. He's in Gaza. And he and his company were in an area that was cleaned out of the terrorists. It was bulldozed completely. There's no buildings left. And they cleaned everything out of the terrorists. They were given a few minutes to relax, a break. And everyone sat down to rest. Everyone's exhausted. They're working really hard there. They have great morale and they're really pushing. And this man, Melchiel, said, wait, I see the sun setting. They're giving us a few minutes break. I can pray the afternoon service. Meaning, again, as a soldier, they don't always get to pray, and that they're protecting Jewish people. They're protecting the land. That's okay. That's permissible in such a situation. But if you can have the opportunity to pray, you grab it. So he's like, the sun is set. I can pray now the afternoon service. Now, when we pray the afternoon service, if we are anywhere outside of Israel, we turn in the direction of Israel, which means in America, we face east in our prayers. What do you do when you're in Israel? Well, when you're in Israel, you face Jerusalem. So for anybody who's praying in Israel, they face Jerusalem. So he turned in the direction of Jerusalem to pray the prayers. Now, it happened to be, so to speak, that everyone else in his company that sat down to rest, they were facing the opposite direction. So they were all sitting exhausted and their backs were to him. And he was in the other direction facing Jerusalem. And he's in the middle of the prayer of the Shemona Esrei. And suddenly he sees a terrorist with an RPG coming from underground, from a tunnel they didn't discover. They're constantly finding and detonating and neutralizing this whole network of tunnels, literally in underground cities that are going on there. And they're so dangerous for exactly this reason. So a terrorist comes up with his RPG. And besides this one person in prayer, Melchiel, everyone's back was to him. In 1 second, he could have killed them all. But Melchiel was facing him because he was facing Jerusalem. So he saw the terrorists. So he shouted and he shot. And all the other soldiers turned around and they saw. And between everyone, they managed to eliminate this terrorist. And all the soldiers, again, many of them are not officially religious. Some are not. All the soldiers said, tomorrow we are all praying this prayer, this afternoon service prayer, because it saved our lives. Today it saved our lives. God, we're going to pray to you tomorrow. And all these stories, these 3 stories I shared, and of course, hundreds, literally hundreds more, but they're all expressing the miracles we create by our service of God. And that's a very important point, and that's very relevant for all of us. All of us, we create miracles, and as we serve God more and more, there's more and more miracles that we are creating. And that's something we all should always remember, and it is literally relevant for every single one of us. Of course, that doesn't mean God can't give us miracles for free, and of course he does, but it's also good for us to know that we have this ability through our service, through our turning to him, to literally create miracles. Something else that's been coming out a lot is love, is the love people have for each other. And I think that's also worth thinking about. Big stories, smaller stories that are expressing this point. I just saw recently someone in Israel, I do not think I can pronounce his name, something like Artem Doglapiat, but I could be mangling it. He's an Olympic gold medal champion. And he said he's putting his gold medal to auction. You never think about it, but it's a solid gold medal and it's worth approximately $100,000. And he wants to sell the gold medal to use the money to help all the people that are displaced from the South. There are approximately 250,000 displaced people. I was speaking yesterday to a former student who had just made a very brief trip to Israel over Thanksgiving weekend. And she met people there that are 7 kilometers away from Gaza. So they're just like 1 kilometer too far to be taken care of by the government. But they also don't have homes and they this and they that craziness. Like she met people like this. They're like, their settlement wasn't attacked by the terrorists, but actually a number of people from the festival ran to their settlement and were saved. Thank God they ran to the right settlement, not to closer settlements where other people ran to and did not survive. God directed the feet of each person to go where they were supposed to go. So she said, no, they weren't attacked, but their houses are totally demolished. But the government's not even picking up the tab to fix them because they're 7 kilometers from Gaza. I think you have to be, 6 or something like that for the government to take care of you. But there are 250,000 people like that, 250,000 people that are officially displaced. And it's so hard for them. They've been living a non-life since October. This woman said herself, she said her children don't have school. She doesn't have a house. They're just sort of trying to figure out what they're going to do. Thank God they all survived. Thank God they weren't attacked. It's a hard, hard situation. So he said he wants to take this gold medal worth approximately $100,000 and sell it. Now, the gold medal symbolizes he was the world champion. It's very important. It's very significant. He said, what's the point in being a world champion if the people in my country are hurting? For me, that comes first. And I think it's a very important point for all of us. Not that too many of us are Olympic gold medalists, that we have that in our back pocket, that we could auction it off. But I think the point of it is relevant for all of us. The point of it, as we look at our own lives and we look at what we do have and look at what we can do, and think also the same thing. What can I do? Obviously in my way, and obviously that's different than in his way, but what can I do that expresses this love, this sense of, what's my comfort worth if people are hurting, if people are displaced, if people are in such pain? Now this story, I'm calling it story, the story of Hamas, the story of what's going on in Gaza is not new. This story of God's unbelievable protection is not new either. Every day I pray for the many things in Israel, and one of the things I pray for every single day is that the Israeli government have the wisdom and courage to do the best thing to save the people's lives. I pray the army be the tool through which God will do supernatural. Unfortunately, we've seen in the past that God works through the army supernaturally, but the government falls under political calculations, and all the supernatural victories of the army do not help. It's very fascinating. In 1982, in July of 1982, the Lubavitcher Rebbe spoke. This was during the middle of what was called in Hebrew Shalom HaGalil, the first war in Lebanon, which means literally peace in the Galil. Galil is the region along the Israeli-Lebanese border. So Israel invaded Lebanon in June 6 of 1982 for Shalom HaGalil, to get peace for the Galil, for this region. If we go back historically to understand what was going on, Israel had, we call it relative peace with Lebanon until 1968, when the PLO took root in southern Lebanon. Because obviously that was very strategic importance for them to be able to attack Israel from southern Lebanon. And from 68, they just kept attacking and attacking and attacking until 1976. In 1976, Israel invaded Lebanon, not to fight the country, but to create a buffer zone, a safe zone, but they wouldn't be attacked. Now, in Lebanon, originally, not really so much now, there were Muslim Lebanese, and there were also Christians. And the Christian Lebanese people were not trying to fight the Jews. It was the Muslim Lebanese people that were falling under the prey of the PLO. So when 1976, when Israel invaded, what they basically tried to do was settle this buffer zone, the southern end of Lebanon, with Christian Lebanese people, not Jews. They weren't trying to take over the land, but they were trying to put their Christian Lebanese people so they wouldn't attack them. And this worked until 1978, because until then, Israel kept a peacekeeping force in Lebanon and protected the Christian Lebanese, and there was peace. And then the UN said in 1978 that Israel has to leave and the UN will take care of the peace. Well, of course, when the UN is taking care of the peace, that means the second the Israelis left and the UN came in, the PLO attack started all over again. So this was from 1978. So in 78 and 79 and 80 and 81 and 82, becomes more attacks and more attacks and more attacks. And it was just getting worse and worse and worse. And finally, like the final straw, if you will, in June of 82 is when the Israeli ambassador to the United Kingdoms was shot and seriously wounded in London. And they said, forget it. The PLO is now this worldwide network of terror against Israel and against Jews. And we have to wipe them out. So June 6th, they launched an attack to destroy the PLO. That was the purpose of the attack. We need to destroy the PLO. We need to be safe. We need to be safe in Israel. We need to be safe in the whole world. We need to destroy the PLO. So they wanted to destroy the PLO. They wanted to get rid of the Syrians. There were a lot of Syrians that had come into Lebanon to support and the PLO and that whole movement. And what we would like to do is install the Christian Lebanese as the ruling party, because the Israelis knew that if the Christian Lebanese are in control, there'll be peace between Lebanon and Israel. Those were their goals. Now, again, Hamas has not invented any new wheels here. Everything Hamas is doing is exactly what the PLO did in Lebanon. The terrorists embedded within the civilian population, that is now, that was then. The terrorists using civilians as human shields, that is now, that was then. Every refugee camp that the Israeli army went to had bunkers, trenches, firing positions. They didn't come to the sophistication of Hamas's underground cities of tunnels, but they still made it very, very difficult. But they attacked on June 6th. By June 14th, they were on the outskirts of Beirut. Beirut is the capital. And then they decided not to capture Beirut. The government claimed, I don't believe them, it would have been too difficult, too much of a cost for Israeli soldiers' lives. Instead, we're going to besiege the city. Who's in the city? The PLO and about 30,000 Syrians. And we're going to besiege the city, and we're going to bomb the PLO targets. We're going to try to assassinate the leaders. Doesn't sound exactly what they're doing today. It's the exact same strategies. They were there for all of the rest of June, 2 more weeks in June, for all of July. And in August, they made an agreement, and 14,000 PLO members and 6,500 Fatah members, which is another terrorist organization, they all left Lebanon and they went to Tunisia. So now we have a new headquarters for PLO. It's not Lebanon, it's Tunisia. And then as the IDF gradually left the area, these smaller radical Islamic organizations sprung up. And of course, we know the history. They consolidated in Hezbollah. Hezbollah is much larger than the PLO ever was. Hezbollah now has 30,000, what they call full-time fighters, like on their payroll, and between 100 and 120,000 volunteers, volunteer terrorists. So you're talking about potentially about 150,000 terrorists. That's the history. Beyond perfectly parallel, and really to understand what the Rebbe was saying in July of 1982, because it is so resonating, and maybe the Rebbe said it for now. Everything the Rebbe was saying is totally applicable to now. Maybe that's why it was said. So the Rebbe begins, Rebecca?
Oh, I just wanted to make a really quick comment that a long time ago, back when Al-Qaeda was the main focus, I watched this news report. A reporter went and talked to some of the Al-Qaeda men, actually, and they came right out and said, and they boasted, oh, you can kill our leaders. We're just 10 more are going to come up in their place. They weren't even worried about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because this is a culture that worships death almost. And that's why, that's how they're trained. They're trained from infancy. I mean, there's so many videos and pictures coming out of young children, of literally like what we would call camps for children, boys and girls, to train them to fight, to train them to kill, to train them in hatred. And I die, who cares? What's my life worth? What's their life about? You know, I can bring down my enemy with me. That's all I want. You'll kill the leaders. We'll find new leaders. So yes, that is unfortunately very true. And that's why there has to be this sense of destruction until the end. Actually, it's very interesting. I was learning with someone on Thursday, nothing directly about the war. We were learning a Hasidic text. And in the text, the Jewish people were compared or called God's army. When we left Egypt, we were given the title that we're God's army. And of course, that resonated a lot nowadays with the whole army reality. And this woman said something that really inspired me. She said, well, you know, the soldiers in Gaza are really committed because they know we're going to fight until it's over. No such thing as we assassinate the leaders, we're done, like you're saying. Or we destroyed a lot of tunnels. We destroyed like 10 years of millions of dollars of their work, so we're done. No such thing. We're fighting until we finish. And because they know they're fighting until it's over, They have the energy, they have the excitement, they have the drive, they have the passion to keep fighting. And she said, that's similar with us in bringing redemption. We're God's soldiers. We're fighting a war. We're bringing redemption. And we know the same thing. We know we're at the finish line. We know we're not over. We're not stopping. We're not done until we complete the job and bring redemption. So when we keep that in mind, we are finishing the job. The job that mankind's been working on one way or another for 5,784 years. We also have this energy, this drive to keep going because we know we're finishing the job. But what you're saying is absolutely true. And that's why it's not enough to assassinate the leaders. It's not enough to destroy many, many, many tunnels as they have. It's not enough. The job will never be enough until we absolutely, completely destroy every shred of Hamas. And now possibly also of Hezbollah. So in the Code of Jewish Law, in the laws of Sabbath, this is how the Rebbe begins his talk. In section 329, within which subsection 6, it speaks about people besieging cities, Jewish cities, on Shabbos, on the Sabbath. And are you allowed to desecrate the Sabbath to protect yourself? And the answer is it depends. If they're coming for money, no. You're not allowed to desecrate the Sabbath for money. Give them the money, don't desecrate the Sabbath. But if they're coming to kill you, you're allowed to desecrate the Sabbath to save your life. And if we don't know why they're coming, maybe it's to kill us, maybe not, you're also allowed to desecrate the Sabbath to save your life. And if they haven't arrived yet, and maybe by the time they arrive, it'll already be after Sabbath, but we know they're on their way with weapons, we're allowed to desecrate the Sabbath to make a preemptive strike if that will help us get rid of them faster. And if you're a border city, even if they only want small change, they're coming for straw, most cheap item. They're not coming for lives. They're coming for money. They're coming for small money, for straw. Desecrate the Sabbath. Why? Because if they come for straw, they might end up conquering the city. They're not looking to kill you, but they might conquer the city. And if they conquer the city and you're a border city, this will make it very easy to conquer the rest of the land. Not because of the holiness of Israel we desecrated the Sabbath. The original source in the Talmud is not talking about Israel. It's talking about a city in Babylonia called Noahide. But it was a Jewish city on the border. And the sages are saying, even if it's Sabbath, and they're coming for straw, we just taught you that if they're coming for money, don't desecrate the Sabbath. They are not coming for lives. They're only coming for straw. We desecrate the Sabbath to protect the city. Because if they conquer the city, they'll conquer the country. And in a place as small as Israel, any place they go is a border city. Any place they go is if they conquer this, they have a foothold in the country, which of course is the whole idea of what they're doing in Gaza. What is Gaza? It's a piece of land of Israel. And the Israeli government, for political reasons I do not want to go into and are very painful, decided, let's give the Arabs land and let them become their own people. Here they're complaining, they're oppressed and they're oppressed and they're oppressed. Fine, we'll give them land, let them start their own country. There are about 10,000 Jewish settlers that lived in this area. The Israeli government evicted them very harshly, very brutally. And they gave this land, it was a beautiful land, all built up by these Israeli settlers. They gave it to the Arabs. Your land, build up your country. And one of the first things that happened was that Hamas came and destroyed it all. Hamas didn't want the people to have a chance of building up a beautiful new country. They wanted them to be poor and refugees and victims that the world has to support them. So they destroyed the greenhouses and the waterworks and the beautiful homes and everything that the Israeli settlers had built up. Hamas burned and destroyed, but the Arabs shouldn't have it. They didn't want them to have a good life there. They wanted them to be in this culture of kill, fight. We're the victims. We hate the oppressors. We're the oppressed. They're the oppressors. The only choice we have is just to kill, to terrorize. But we see very clearly that because we gave them Gaza, we gave them that land. It was our land and we gave it to them. They had no more hold over Gaza than they had over Tel Aviv, than they have over Jerusalem. We just gave them this piece of land. And it's exactly what The Code of Jewish Law says now they have a foothold in the country, and now they're shooting missiles, they're shooting rockets at everywhere in the country, as happened, unfortunately, today in a tremendous, tremendous, tremendous number. So this point that the Lubavitcher began with is a point that he comes back to many, many times when he talks about this issue. We have to destroy the enemy because Israel is so tiny. Israel is so narrow that once they get a foothold, like we gave them with Gaza, they'll take the whole country. That's what they want. They're not satisfied. They're not happy with what they got. Right? Because they have the opportunity now. They're shooting rockets. They're trying to destroy and conquer the entire Israel. They want to drive 10 million people into the sea. That's their stated overt goal, from the river to the sea. Of course, half the people in America that are chanting that have no clue what river and what sea. But Hamas knows what river and what sea they're talking about. Mm-hmm. The Rebbe said about the Lebanon war, we need to complete the war. The goal of the war was to remove the danger to the people's security. And the Rebbe said, we're not just talking about security in the north. Okay, it's a problem in the north. Lebanon, they're attacking in the north. The Rebbe said, no. They're going to attack in the south. They're going to attack in the east. They're going to attack in the west. In the entire country, when you have terrorists at our border, we have terrorists that are attacking. Nowhere in the country is it safe. People should live without fear. And to do that, the Rebbe said, you can't leave in the middle without finishing the job. Like the verse says, that if we leave people, if we leave the enemy, there'll be thorns in our eyes and thorns in our sides. We can't leave people. We have to destroy it completely. We have to uproot it completely. This is what the army is saying. They're the experts in security. When we just think security, and we don't think politics, we know we have to finish the job completely. We know in this case, in 1982, it meant completely destroy the PLO, completely take over Lebanon. The Torah says that for security, you follow the experts. Just like with medicine, you follow the doctors. And this is an incredibly critical message for now, because it's so easy for people to feel like, we fought, we destroyed, we won, we conquered, we destroyed. No. People get tired of war. People get tired. They want it to be over already. They can't wait for it to end. The Rebbe said, no, you can't want it to end before we finish the job and destroy completely. In 1982, we needed to destroy the PLO completely, and we didn't. And they're still around. And the terrorism in Lebanon is still there, far greater than it was in 1982. We needed to destroy completely, and we needed to take over Lebanon to make sure it stayed safe. And now we need to destroy Hamas completely, entirely, no matter how long it takes, and no matter how much the world's going to scream about it. The Rebbe said, only if you finish the job does it validate all the lives lost. Every person's an entire world. The only justification for all the soldiers' lives, for all the soldiers that died, is to secure the safety of all the people in Israel. That's the only thing that justifies the lives lost, because that's going to prevent future lives lost. But if you don't finish the job, you didn't really do anything meaningful to protect the lives. So it's just a tragedy. All the soldiers got killed for nothing. If now there'd be real protection, real safety for the people of Israel, that would justify, it's the only justification for the soldiers' deaths. Now, the Rebbe said this in 1982 about the soldiers in the Lebanon war. It's equally true now. The only justification for each life lost is the guarantee we won't lose more lives to Hamas or any other terrorists in the area. And especially, the Rebbe said concerning 1982 and the war in Lebanon, because God showed so many miracles. What the army calculated would take 2 days took less than 1. And the army said, this is the hand of God. There's no way naturally. I told you, June 6th, they invaded. By June 14th, they were at the boundaries of Beirut. That makes no sense. It wasn't natural. And guess what? The same thing is happening now. The army calculated before they went in that we would lose approximately 12 soldiers a day, which is a huge number for such a small population. Now we're over 70 days into the war, and tragically, we have lost lives. But a tiny number compared to 70 days of war times 12. Now, of course, every life that lost was a tragedy, and there's definitely many soldiers that are wounded, and that's a tragedy. But it's miraculous, considering the terrain of the Lebanon war and the terrain of the Gaza war is the hardest terrain to fight. Very crowded areas, lots of civilians. So the victories are miraculous. The victories in the Lebanon war were miraculous. Those victories were miraculous. And all the victories thus far have been miraculous, which doesn't take away the fact that many people died. For us, every person's a world. Many worlds have been extinguished. And the only validation for that is to make sure no one else is going to die. The Rebbe said, describing the miracles in Lebanon, that several times the army reported that when the terrorists saw the soldiers coming, they ran away. Like literally, the soldiers didn't have to fight them. Literally, they fled just like the verse says in all directions. They didn't even need to use their weaponry. And the Rebbe said, so God is showing such miracles. Obviously, God wants you to finish the job. As the Torah says, follow the experts in security. And all the experts would say, the best way to guarantee safety is to destroy the enemy, which unfortunately is not what they did. They didn't do that in 1982. They let the enemy leave. They let the enemy regroup. They let the enemy continue to terrorize. And that's what we don't want to happen here. We don't want any safe passage if you leave Gaza. We don't want any stopping in the middle. We have to finish it. Hamas has guaranteed that to us. They have promised they will do October 7th again and again and again. That's their vision. So we can't let them exist to, on any level, have that opportunity. I know it's late, but I'm just going to finish this point. I think it's very interesting because these are very powerful words of the Rebbe. And they were not fulfilled in 1982. Didn't happen. The government didn't listen. Politics took over. That was more important, unfortunately, than security. And as I said, they let the PLO and Fatah leave. And eventually they left, and it became this, breeding ground for Hezbollah. So maybe when the Rebbe spoke in 1982, it was also, or primarily, for now. It's very similar to the Yom Kippur War. Because by the Yom Kippur War, the Rebbe said, conquer Damascus. Maybe that's also for now. The Yom Kippur War, the Rebbe said, conquer it. Okay, you'll have to give it back. But the borders will change. At that point, in the Yom Kippur War, you had Syria from the north and Egypt from the south. And the Rebbe said, what are you pursuing Egypt for? We're not going to change those borders. But if we go to Syria, we can change the borders. We will get from the Syrian land. And that's very significant. That was the Rebbe's perspective in the Yom Kippur War. And here in 82, that was the Rebbe's perspective in Lebanon. Conquer Lebanon. Control it as a military zone. Change the borders of Israel. Why? What do we need that land? What do we want it for? What do we need this headache of controlling this Arab country? Because it's the only way to ensure our security. Then there wouldn't be any Hezbollah against us if since 1982 we were controlling it. We wouldn't have allowed Hezbollah to spring up. We wouldn't have 150,000 terrorists there wanting to murder us. And this is what we need to do. We need to create such a buffer zone between us and the enemy to protect lives. So we are in the middle of this concept, but it is quite late. So we will stop now. And why are we learning this? Why are we discussing this? You could say, hey, listen, maybe if I was on the Israeli War Council, if I was part of the Prime Minister's cabinet, why are we going into this now? We're going into it because we have a spiritual reality. And just like last week, we used our spiritual energy to defeat the lie of Christianity by our words. Now, as we believe in this, as we pray for it, as we talk about it, as we uphold it, that also gives spiritual energy for this to happen.